Why Make It Jump was funny. I saw it and I laughed.
I didn't even know it was out.
Huh?
Didn't even know it was out.
Yeah, I just saw it on Hulu because it's on Hulu.
Oh, that's it. Because I was looking at my Cinemark app the other day because I was like, hey, maybe I'll go watch a movie this weekend. I didn't go, by the way. Spoiler alert.
You don't want to see Guardians of the Galaxy.
Why would I want to see Guardians of the Galaxy 3 right now? I haven't watched a single Marvel movie since Endgame.
So?
I don't know what the fuck's going on.
Nothing. I mean, you don't have to know what's going on for that movie. It was just a fun movie. A good movie. Good time.
But continue.
But
yeah, I didn't see it on there is my point. And I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, it was on Hulu.
Was it basically a straight to streaming type movie?
Yeah. I don't think I'll be in the theaters at all. I'm glad it wasn't because what the fuck. But it's obviously like you don't take it serious. Obviously, like you're not supposed to take it that serious. But I laughed out loud. I thought it was pretty funny.
You LL'd.
Yeah, I LOL'd for sure. I think Giancarlo has potential to be a good like comedian actor. He's pretty funny, and he has like charisma.
Yeah.
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 I saw a clip of him and Lil Dicky on the Lil Dicky show.
Okay.
And that shit was funny as fuck. Shit was hilarious. And they also posted like bloopers. I would watch a movie of them two, like a comedy. I don't know, like a comedy. I don't know what kind of comedies like for two people. Like a good cop, bad cop shit. Not that, no.
Like a buddy cop movie.
Yeah, buddy cop. Yeah. Nah, not like that. But a movie with them two, I feel like that would be hilarious. Good ass movie.
I'll take your word for it.
If you're an executive and you're listening, write that up quick, please.
Well, first of all, why are you listening to this podcast?
Yeah, first of all, why? I got a couple questions before you do something, but
yeah, our first question is why are you here?
Yeah.
Second, you should be doing your job. No one of these movies suck.
Yeah, go get AI to write this movie real quick. That's a trigger. Look, Evan's a trigger for Evan. But yeah, go get AI to write the movie real quick. Get them
How
to
about
act.
don't?
Hey.
Jokes be ass.
I don't know, man. I don't know. We can talk about it. We can. We don't have to. But
we only talk about AI every fucking episode.
Every episode.
So let's not.
Okay.
If we can avoid it.
I mean, why not?
Let's try to avoid.
Why?
Because we're not trying to fill out the bingo card today.
Bingo card?
Is AI just like our free space?
Yeah.
Okay.
No. Yeah, it probably is.
Probably
is now. For now, it is. Yeah.
Old iteration, probably Marvel. This iteration is AI.
Yeah, for sure.
We've at least mentioned it.
For sure.
I guess technically we've hit it now.
For sure. Yeah. But yeah, if you're looking for something to watch, it's funny, go ahead and give that a look. You know, you'll laugh out loud maybe. Or you think this shit is the stupidest shit you've ever seen in your life. You know, either or.
Did it ruin the legacy of the first one?
I haven't seen the first one.
Okay.
And I'm like, people will be like, oh, they don't have to remake it. Was the first one even that good?
I'm just tired of remakes.
Why? I never understood that.
What?
People are tired of remakes. I never understood that.
Because one, why is it making a remake if it's already a good thing? Someone can go watch it. Two, the problem is the percentage of films that come out nowadays that are remakes. There's always been remakes, but it hasn't made as high, like it hasn't been as high a percentage of films. Most films that at least get marketing nowadays that go theatrical are either remakes or they're tied to IP. That's the majority of the films that go theatrical.
Let's think about it.
Whereas before you'd have more of a mix. As we've discussed before, and there was also that viral clip where I think which white dude was it?
I don't know.
Matt Damon. Is that the one I'm thinking of? Where he was talking about how the death of home video killed the mid-budget movie.
Yeah.
So now it's either you're going to have a massive amount of money spent for a film, big budget, 100 million plus for an IP, or you're going to have like under $20 million movies. So you're missing that mid-range that used to be where you would take chances and have different type of stories told. Now it's like if we can make a remake of an IP for less than $20 million, which I'm pretty sure that movie we're talking about, Why Make Can't Jump remake, I bet it probably falls in that category of being a remake of an original film, and that was popular, and it was probably less than 20 million.
For sure.
Which is probably why it went straight to streaming.
Yeah, definitely.
But that is definitely like it checks the boxes an executive will look at. Because they're executives nowadays, because all the film companies belong to public companies, they do whatever they can to protect their job. And if they can check as many boxes as possible on something working, they're going to go with those. And that's why you don't see as many original films unless somebody who's making it has established himself.
Yeah. I get why they make it. I don't get why people are mad. I mean, I guess there's too many remakes. I guess that's an issue.
Yeah, it's just more of an overall complaint that a lot of people have from the fact of there's just so many remakes. And
But
then if
is there?
Disney makes a new movie nowadays, live action, it's always just an adaptation of an already existing movie.
But what live action movie has Disney made that wasn't a remake or wasn't like a original story before?
Live action wise, I would have to actually go and look.
I just can't remember the last time that actually happened. That was like a big movie.
It's happened, but I don't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah,
But I'm thinking recent years. But
Yeah,
they've had like original. But here's also the thing is like, are we considering like the big Disney part? Or are we talking about like any of their subsidiaries? Because you could consider like a Disney Channel makes their original movies based on their shows.
Yeah, I'm not talking about Disney Channel.
Yeah,
I'm
that's what I
talking
mean
about
is like, are we talking about
theatrical releases.
like this is Disney?
I'm talking about theatrical releases, whether it be subsidiaries or just Disney in general, overall. The subsidiary, whatever.
Pirates of the
subsidiaries.
Caribbean.
Okay, that is a good one. Big franchise.
Yeah, I mean, granted,
And
it's
then-
based on the theme park. They've done a bunch of theme park based movies. They had one recently with The Rock.
You're right. Actually, there's like a Haunted Mansion is coming out, but it's I guess what I'm trying to say is all Disney IP stuff
Yeah,
that they make, and
but those aren't remakes.
but they are remaking it. Like Haunted Mansion's a remake.
Well, I'm not talking about that one because I don't even know the fuck. I haven't heard it. I don't know.
Because Haunted Mansion, have you seen the one with Eddie
No.
Murphy back in the day?
Mm-mm.
I don't know if it's the same thing.
I don't think it's the same thing.
I think it is, but
Because I think Pirates of the Caribbean was the first time that they actually made a live action movie from a theme park ride. And then it hit, and they're like, okay, we'll do this more.
I know for a fact the Haunted Mansion is the same. So there's Haunted Mansion. I just want to preference that we don't know if you need
Yeah.
information.
This podcast, we just say shit.
Yeah, but Haunted Mansion, there's multiple like types of Haunted Mansion stuff. Like there's a Paris Haunted Mansion. There's one in I don't know if it's Paris, but there's one like in Europe.
Petty.
And then there's one in the US, and they're like the same thing, but it's
Yeah.
like different, you know? So I'm not sure if there's different like types of stories with the Haunted Mansion. Like there's different stories. But anyways, I guess what I'm trying to say is I feel like remakes aren't a bad thing.
In themselves aren't necessarily a bad thing. It's just the volume percentage of versus
Even the
what
volume,
gets
I
made.
think. is
I
not
think
that
if you
thing.
got more like different types of shit being made, like more original stuff, then I think it wouldn't be as big of a deal. But it just has to do with like the biggest company in the world, the biggest film company right now, based on just pure revenue.
Mm.
All of their films are either superhero films from Marvel, making Star Wars franchise movies that they had purchased Star Wars, remakes of their animated films that have already existed for many, many years. And that's basically, and the only other things they make is just stuff that they already own the IP on. And I think that just kind of rubs audiences the wrong way. Granted, here's the thing: is people say that, but then people go and watch all of the fucking remakes, and then
Yeah.
go and watch original movies.
And a lot of the remakes are good and entertaining.
I mean, good is subjective.
Well, it's hard for you to say that because you haven't really seen movies. Like
I'm
a
just
lot of
talking
movies.
about like it's just overall audience opinion on stuff.
Yeah, but I think
But-
that's what I think. I think the audience opinion is based on the fact that there's just so many remakes, so it's like they just have that opinion before even like going to see.
Well,
the
yeah.
movie.
Well, the danger of remaking anything is you're gonna have people that go into it that are fans of the original. They're like, "Why the fuck are you touching this?"
I guess that's what I'm saying. If I'm a fan of original, I'm like, please touch it. Like, please
Pause.
remake it. Pause. Yeah. Like, please remake it. I want to see it. I want to see it. I don't want to see it. See it
Why?
again.
You're the only person I've ever heard say that.
Because why not? It's something that
If
I like.
something is great, why the fuck would you like? Okay, what's the older movie that you fucking love?
Kill Bill.
And now if some random fucking director goes and remakes Kill Bill, you're just gonna fucking be all in?
Okay, I
Fuck
wouldn't-
out of here.
I would say a random. If Quentin Tarantino wanted to remake Kill Bill, I'll be all for it.
So he's not.
Okay, but I'm saying, of course he's not. That's why it's made. But
And I think he's also anti-remake.
I don't know. I don't know his.
But you know,
opinions
he's
about
kind of
that.
like one of those film pretentious motherfuckers.
Yeah. I don't know. I just feel like there is no issue. There's like for music, for example, there's a lot of interpolation. There's a lot of samples that are really good. And
But here's the thing: they're taking like an element of something and turning into something new.
Yeah, a lot of remakes aren't the exact same thing. It's like
I
a
would say here, I guess here's an example of what you're saying right there is the difference between a sample and just doing a full on like a cover. I think is what you can differentiate between what you're trying to say with what you can do with a remake versus what usually happens with a remake. So if you just take like the chord progression of a song with like a voice, like a vocal sample, and then you flip it into something completely different, like Kanye did for many, many years, where he would just speed it up, chop it up like crazy, and turn it into something completely different sounding. If you're familiar with the original, you can see those elements, but the overall sound and structure of the song is going to be completely different. Whereas, where if you take like where a lot of big like random songs you hear now, it's like they will literally just almost redo the same song in a lot of ways. Or you can have like a full on cover where you can change up the instruments and everything, but the song itself is still the same.
and
I
if it's
think what you're saying with the remake, most remakes are more like a cover than they are of like a complete like sample of something. I think sampling would be more of like what Tarantino does, where like he'll take like um, sequences from a film or shots from other films from older movies, and he turns it into something different within a largely original story.
um yeah, I get what you're saying. But I'm also talking about like covers. I think covers are cool. Um I think remakes of songs are cool. Like I don't have any issues with that at all. I don't. And it confuses me when people do, because it's like, first off, hella people still go out to see it and enjoy it. So it's like, do y'all really have an issue with it? Because if y'all don't, then these movies would not make it as much money, and they wouldn't keep trying to remake movies.
Well, I mean, that's what I was saying earlier. Is the problem is they keep making enough money. Where I don't know, maybe if it's the same group of people, or people go in there to hate watch it, or if it's just enough people just don't give a shit about anything, and they're just like, feed me whatever. And I'm just like, oh, I'm used to seeing this name. Let me go watch that. Or because what Star is Born, what they did their fourth fucking time remaking that movie.
What movie?
Star is Born.
Oh, I don't know. I never seen it.
I've never seen any of them.
Yeah.
I think the most recent one was Lady Gaga and is it Bradley Cooper? It's one of those.
Bradley Cooper. Yeah.
I get him and like three other white dudes confused.
Yeah. I like Bradley Cooper.
Yeah, basically what I'm just saying is I think the problem is they keep doing enough money to keep making them. And then original films don't do enough for like companies to take chances on them. So we've just gotten in this place where a majority of films get released are based on IP or a remake. And that's made a lot of people frustrated, but they don't support the other shit. And I think that's why A24 has been able to make like a space for themselves, is they're doing full on original films. Granted, like The Green Knight is based on Arthurian legend, but that's also public domain, so it's a little bit different. But they make these weird original films and they market directly to people that want to watch that. And they've been able to make a space for themselves, whereas the bigger companies, they're trying to hit broad audiences.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. I feel like it is a kind of a complicated conversation just off the remakes versus that. But like original movies in general with creative stories, whatever. I mean, a lot of times they are misses that we just don't talk about. I feel like
Yeah,
like
most of the time.
Ari
yeah.
Aster came out with I forgot the movie's called, but it's recent
Who?
drop. Ari Aster. He did. He works for A24. They released a movie recently. Bo Was Afraid.
What other movies has he done?
I forgot. I think I want to say he did. Not Hereditary. I want to say that, but I don't think he did.
Yeah.
But basically, he's like just this creative, unique kind of storyteller. And that movie bombed. The movie didn't do good at all. It had Joaquin Phoenix in it. But but it's like I just get confused when people like have that argument or get mad at that, because it's like there's all types of movies that are not good. Like whether it be remakes, whether it be creative, whatever. I just enjoy remakes. I enjoy the original. I enjoy all types of movies. And it's just confusing when, not confusing, but I just don't understand it really when people have that argument.
I guess my thought would be is there is a portion that's very vocal of people that, of course, pay attention to what's current in pop culture, that I think it comes down to is people can pick up to a certain degree, and it varies between person to person, intent. And I think a lot of times when people see like a new remake, they see the intent of like, the intent is not to like, maybe the director who did it or the writer who did it had the intention to make like as good as possible and pay respects or do something different with it, like on purpose, but while keeping respect for the original product. I think the issue is people can kind of tell the machine behind it doesn't truly have the intention of giving a fuck about the original while they're doing a remake. Their the machine's thought process is, this made money before, remakes make enough money, whereas originals on a spreadsheet don't make as much. You don't have the same return for your investment percentage wise.
That's a better argument.
I think the people pick up that intention of, this is not to pay respect to the original, it's to make a quick buck.
Yeah, that's a better argument. That is a better argument for sure. And I want to argue back with what movies are there that have that, that feel like where studios just don't give a fuck about, like remakes.
What I mean by give a fuck, I mean I
understand
they're what they give a fuck about is they see, hey, we spend $20 million on this original film, and this director isn't fucking somebody who's done this before, like a Jordan Peele who's built his way up, proving his original ideals will bring money back, or a Christopher Nolan, or many other directors that have been able to get themselves in that position where people buy into the director, so then they'll buy into the film, regardless of what they make. So if they don't have that, if the director who's making that film does not have that same draw, then giving them $20 million versus giving $20 million to a remake, the chances percentage-wise to make the money back, when they look at the amount of films that have been remakes that have ended up at least breaking even versus original films from a director who doesn't have the track record of constantly making money back, they'll go, I have a 60%, I don't know if these actual percentages, but I have a 60% chance of recouping my money with this remake. But if I went the same amount of money into this original idea, I have maybe a 20% chance of getting that money back.
I get it.
So as the executive whose job is on the line, I can say, hey, I made the smart decision based on the percentages. And then that's why that movie gets made over an original idea.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, and I think that people pick up that intention from the machine. And again, I think majority of the public doesn't give a fuck.
Yeah.
I think it's more the people that are more tied into caring about movies, talking about movies, paying attention to what the fuck is going on. Most people couldn't tell you the difference between Disney and then one of their subsidiaries.
Yeah.
Or they couldn't tell you the difference between Universal and Paramount.
Yeah. Yeah, I get it.
Whereas other people are more tapped in. It's this is a Paramount movie. This is a Universal movie. Universal usually does this, Paramount owes these IPs, so they usually make these,
Yeah, for sure. And I also understand
those people are going to be more sensitive to knowing, okay, we know why this movie's getting made.
Yeah,
they know how the sausage is made, essentially. Whereas if you don't, then you're like, oh, this Frank's hot dog tastes delicious.
Yeah, for sure. And I also understand there are certain things that don't need to be remade. Like Peter Pan. I feel like, why remake that? I could have just let it be.
Didn't they remake that already?
Yeah, there's a Peter Pan on Disney Plus, I think. Not Hook, but it's actual another Peter Pan remake. And I get it. There's some remakes that are just you don't need remake. But I feel like most of the remakes is whatever. White Man Can't Jump, I've never seen it. And was it even that big of a movie back then anyway?
It was one of those movies that was kind of like a cultural movie.
Yeah. So it's
where it was they made it cheap. It got big within certain communities.
Yeah.
It's kind of I'm trying to think of an example. Maybe like Menace to Society, I don't think was that massive of a movie, but it had its niches.
Yeah. There's a lot of movies like that in the culture.
And I think I think White Man Can't Jump is just one of those.
Yeah. But yeah, that's funny.
Have we turned that into a conversation?
I have no idea. But yeah, that shit was funny. White Man Can't Jump.
Oh yeah.
At the end of the story, yeah. I enjoyed it.
Okay.
I don't know. Did you watch anything recently? Of course.
Just some anime in there, but that's about it.
I already know the answer to that question every time, actually.
And?
I don't know, man. You gotta go watch something. You should have watched Guardians of the Galaxy. You had a great time. I want to go see Little Mermaid, too.
I'm not watching Little Mermaid.
Yeah, I want to see it.
But I've only said that every single episode we've talked about it.
We talked about Little Mermaid before?
It was just briefly.
Yeah.
And I'm just I don't watch Disney remakes of animated films. Granted, Little Mermaid was never my bag anyways.
I've never seen the original.
Really?
Yeah.
Have you watched anything? Anything before 2005?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, of course I have, but like,
Did you not just grow up watching all different random shit?
I did. That's why I said I don't remember every single thing that I watched. I watched all types of stuff. Like
You never saw the original fucking Lion King.
I feel like I have. I just don't remember every single detail like everybody else does. Like I have the Lion King what do you call it? The tape in the little orange
VHS?
Yeah, VHS. I had the Lion King. I had what else did I have? I had the Rugrats.
The orange Rugrats
Yeah,
one?
I had that, but I don't remember anything from the movie. Like bits and
You're
pieces.
in Paris. I remember that.
Bits and pieces.
I heard the movie starts off there like in a greenhouse or some shit.
Yeah, I don't know. It's hard for me to remember my childhood like that, honestly. But the Lion King remake was good. I enjoyed it. See that argument. See, the argument with remakes is the same argument, or the same. Like I get confused about the same argument with CGI, or like.
Don't get me started on the CGI fucking shit.
Because people be like all the time, they're like, "Oh, the CGI sucks. It's just trash." I'm looking at it, I'm like, "What are y'all mad about, or what it looks bad about it?" I get so confused every time that I see that.
Well, it's because people have been kind of conditioned on the internet to see CGI, it bad.
That's what I feel about remakes.
Like, I don't think that's a comparable thing because when it comes down to is people with great CGI, a lot of times people don't even realize that it's even there. Like the amount of like CGI that's in a David Fincher movie that you just don't even fucking realize.
Yeah.
It's like almost the entire scene is fucking redone.
Yeah.
With CGI after the fact.
Yeah.
And you don't even fucking realize it. And so much of the shit, but that's because he knows CGI shit, visual effects in and out.
Yeah.
So when he goes to make something, and his team also is that way, they know how to do everything properly to make sure the CGI is, you can't tell the difference. Like all the blood in this movie after a certain point, I can't remember what movie it is, but after a certain movie, all of the CGI, all the blood, all CGI, and you don't even realize it.
Yeah.
There was like a whole sequence in is the girl with the dragon tattoo. There's like a whole wall of sticky notes. When they shot it, all the sticky notes are blank. But they added all this shit after the fact.
Yeah.
And you don't even realize it.
Yeah. People don't realize that about like a lot of movies.
Or the amount of sky replacements get done.
Like background things, trees or whatever.
Yeah, those would be random trees added to a scene.
Just all types of stuff people don't really know.
Yeah. I mean, it's because when people think of CGI, they think of like on a Marvel movie when they clearly didn't have enough time to make something perfect.
Yeah.
Where it kind of looks a little jank, or like the green screen comp wasn't done very well. But that's, again, with that situation, it's because one, the directors who usually end up doing a lot of Marvel movies, typically it's their first big movie. The movies they've done before are like little indie movies where it's just like a little drama, where it's just characters and actual locations. They don't have a background in CGI. So when they go to plan and they're working with the supervisor for the CGI, they're not always on the same page because they don't speak that language. They don't understand it fully. So there's always going to be some disconnect there if the director does not have a background in visual effects already.
And they don't give the artist enough time to even...
Well, that's what I was going to get to next is the biggest thing is the visual effects artists don't have enough time with Marvel movies. Like the whole sequence that people talk about with Black Panther with that horrible, the fight scene at the end between Killmonger and T'Challa.
Yeah.
Where people talk about how like the CGI fight looks so shit because the physics look so bad.
Yeah.
It's because apparently they only had like, I think it was 6 or 8 weeks to do that one whole sequence.
Yeah.
And it's like, if they had 16 weeks or 32 weeks, it would have looked great.
I'm not saying they're the same, those two arguments, but I just feel when I hear both of those arguments, I just feel the same. I just feel confused. I feel like, what are y'all talking about? But
you should hear people talk about CGI in anime. Oh my God. They just see one little bit of CGI and they go, oh, this animation is horrible. And it's like, do you not realize that there is a bunch of CGI backgrounds throughout this whole entire series that you love? It's like there's CGI everywhere.
And I just don't think it's horrible. Whenever people say that, I don't think it's bad. Like I don't have any issues with it. It doesn't take me out the scene at all.
I get there's some level of like appreciation with an anime when it's when they actually fully 2D.
Yeah.
Because it's just it's much more time and effort goes into it.
Yeah.
But I think it's just one of those things of like people are conditioned to think a certain way on, oh, if I see this, then bad, because they've seen examples where it's bad as fuck.
That's exactly how I feel about remakes. be more conditioned to just think remakes are bad without even like seeing the remake. They just be like, "Why are they remaking this?" Blah blah. I'm just
I don't
like,
think it's quite the same.
I think it's the same.
I think that more comes down to, again, is just like the whole thing about people that are more in the know can sense the intention of the remake. If here's with remakes, if it's the studio's idea to do the remake and they find somebody, typically those remakes are the ones that I think people complain about. Whereas there are remakes that you may not realize that are remakes, or that are just remakes, but the people who wanted to do the remake is the person who is also the one creating it. So like an example would be, what was that movie from a couple years ago that Guillermo del Toro did?
I don't know.
Nightmare Alley.
Okay.
That was a remake from a 60s movie.
Yeah.
But it's a remake, but he came up with he took the idea, decided to turn it into something different, build on it in a different way, in his own way of doing things. Like it was a full on it was his baby, but he just took from what someone did before with with the original idea.
Yeah.
That's a little bit different, I feel like, of a remake, if instead of like the studio is like, hey, what movies do we have on the shelf from the 80s? Oh, this movie, it did really well. Do you think it would work nowadays? It might. All right, let's go try to find some directors to pitch on it now.
See, I don't have an issue with either of those two things.
I think I just have an issue with the conveyor belt mentality.
I mean, if it's good, does it matter?
Here's the thing: is most of the time they're just okay from what people say.
I mean, I think. See, I enjoy.
I want greatness, Jordan.
Yeah, like why do we always want
Nightmare Alley was
perfection?
fucking great.
But why do you always want perfection? I feel like if it's entertaining, if it's good, hey, that's a win in my book. Like I don't need perfection, greatness every single time I go to the movie theater. Like I just don't, and I think it's draining because you're gonna have this perception of movies just be like your perception of movies is gonna be bad now. Where for certain things like remakes, people are just gonna be like, oh, your remake's bad because it's not perfection, and they just try to remake the original, which I guess
I'm not the person to have the ability to have this conversation, but there is a level of a conversation regarding the art that's made and how it speaks to culture itself, and the kind of like that circular motion back, where you kind of get a disconnect from. I can't have that discussion because I'm not, one, I've heard the discussion and I feel them. Two, I don't understand what the fuck people say when they're talking about it.
Yeah, I don't.
It gets into a whole like philosophical thing regarding like culture and art that's made. I can't really explain it.
Okay.
But there's like that's like a thing that people will bring up that actually have the ability to have the discussion, is regarding kind of like that circular feedback between the art that's made, what's pop culture, and how it affects culture currently versus how it will affect it in the future, which kind of leads this whole circle of like the films that influenced you as a kid, you end up being influenced by those and making films, and then those films influence the kids after you, which then influences them later when they make their films, and how you can end up losing some level of that whenever like this, like a studio system or corporation ends up just turning it into just SKUs, a barcode, not seeing it as that feed, like not seeing the art and how it affects culture itself.
Yeah. Yeah. Art,
I'm doing a horrible job explaining this.
I get it. I get what you're saying. But man, art and like influence and what's good art and all that is such a complicated.
Well, that's why I said I'm not the one capable of having this discussion.
No, I think it's complicated because who determines what's good art or not? Like that circular motion, I understand what they're trying to say, but like, why is that a good thing? Like, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm not saying it's a good thing. I just want to know why does that need to be a thing?
So also is the discussion, it kind of ties in with another discussion that I'm also not smart enough to, or don't have the shit readily available to talk about, is the role of like the critic in social culture.
Yeah.
In a social culture. Where it goes down to is like, fuck, I wish I've watched one of these discussions recently. That way I can kind of pull some shit from it.
Yeah.
But basically it's the effect of like the critic's role is to try to cause artists to push the envelope in a lot of ways past what generally works, if that makes sense, to try to find a new way of doing things. It's kind of like just a level of innovation involved.
Yeah.
but I don't know. I can't.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Innovation creates new things, new art. I get it. And you don't want to be stagnant. You're
Yeah.
just trying to, I get it.
Because if the studio system had their way, they would just keep remaking the same shit without pushing things that they just know they can get a guarantee. If they could get a guarantee on profit, they would make the same movie over and over again.
Yeah, for sure. I understand that.
And I think that's kind of like a port. I think most people don't really care. Most people just go, huh, this movie sounds interesting. And I'm not busy this weekend. I'll go watch a movie, or I'll go take my spouse to go watch a movie, blah, 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 blah. They don't really look into like paying attention to every movie that comes out. What is this? What's a phenomenal movie? They don't necessarily care about the quality of the movie. They care about, will I be entertained?
Yeah.
And I think that's the majority. Whereas then you have like smaller niches where it's like they care more about the craft of it, or they care about how does this director break the rules but do it in a way that still makes the story great and makes it enjoyable without taking me out of the experience. Like there's levels of, it's kind of like most people when they get headphones, they go, ooh, bass good. And I can hear I can hear enough things where I think this sounds good. But then you'll have audiophiles who spend $8,000 on fucking headphones that require crazy preamps to even hear anything in.
Yeah.
Just because to them, they feel like there's another level of experience that it's like to add 5% more quality to the audio experience. They're willing to spend tens of thousands of dollars on a whole audio setup.
Yeah, I get it. And I'm open to have this conversation with anybody because I'm open. My mindset's open, or thoughts about this is open. But I feel like there are there are parts of the industry where anyone can be like, you can have this general sense of movies where it's like, I just want to be entertained. I don't really care. Or you can be like, I want to know everything of how this movie's made. I enjoy that part. You just have to find where you can, where that can like shine. Like if you're going to see a Marvel movie or going to see a big budget remake with that mindset, you're not going to be satisfied with the mindset of, it has to be like perfection. It has to be, I'm like artist. I want to see how it's made. You're not going to be satisfied because it's not for you, you know? But there are other movies and like other places that are like that. Like I feel like I'm a person where I like the art. I like the writing. I like when things are written really good and creative and smart, and also like just being entertained. And I find places where that shines. And I'm satisfied with what I see because I don't have this expectation of everything needs to be one thing when I go places.
Well, that's your problem, Jordan. You want to be satisfied. Some people don't want to be satisfied. They want greatness.
I guess.
I think that's kind of why James Cameron's kind of become James Cameron, is because he's been able to play in both boxes at the same time.
Yeah.
Where he's able to make the people that care about like the most artistic shit possible with a film, but also still being able to appeal to like the general audience that just wants to be satisfied.
Yeah.
And he's found a way to like hit all those hit as many of those boxes that could be possibly done.
Yeah. And there's other industries that are like that. Like I feel like Drake's like that as well. He's able to check many boxes. That's why he gets so big. He's not just one like pop artist. He can do like the conscious rap shit. And I feel like other industries are like that too.
I've been wanting to put off this conversation because I haven't fully put out this argument, but there has been an argument that I've been kind of putting together that kind of summarizes, I guess, like just people within the entertainment industry.
Yeah.
So it's obviously a sliding scale, but on one end you have entertainers, on the other end you have artists.
Yeah.
Entertainers, they just care about, see, this is why it's hard to fucking break it down. Entertainers, it's not, and this is not like to be saying, oh, if someone's an entertainer, they're not an art. Like, it has nothing to do with like skill sets. It's more of like a mentality.
It's a spectrum.
Well, not even just that. I'm talking about like, you can have someone who's an entertainer who is extremely skilled and talented, but it's their mindset is not that of an artist.
Yeah.
So an artist isn't going to make something to appeal. The artist does something because they want to do it.
Yeah.
And they think it's the best thing, and they don't give a fuck what happens. It's like think of like, I guess maybe like a Prince.
Or like a Frank Ocean.
Like or a Frank Ocean, whatever. Where it's like they're doing it their way. They don't care if you care, but if you do, that's great.
Yeah.
But they just want to do it their way. They're going to do exactly how they want. They'll do it when they want. and they don't care about any repercussions that come from it.
Yep.
Whereas you have an entertainer who's more outwardly focused. They care about, okay, if I do these things, I get these things back. They can care about quality art, but to them, it's like what's going to get the most eyeballs because they're an entertainer.
Yeah.
They want to entertain as many people as they possibly can. So it's a different mentality that comes involved with that.
Yeah. What's your argument about it?
I think my argument comes down to is when you look at the landscape, I think the entertainment industry, obviously, because it's a business, has gone, it feels like it's gone so far towards trying to only really work with entertainers because entertainers are more likely to bend to the wheel of the machine because they know, hey, if I do this, I can get on this Marvel movie, get a lot of people paying attention to me, and then I might be able to do more shit. Whereas like whereas like if you had like a full on just any director who just does whatever the fuck they want, like Tarantino does what the fuck he wants.
Yeah.
And he makes a movie when he wants, and he's like, I'm only going to make 10 movies just because that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
I care about my legacy of being seen as the guy who did what the fuck he wants and knew what he was going to do, and he did it.
Do you think that if people didn't like Quentin Tarantino's movies, that his mindset would change?
No. I think he would still be doing the same shit. He just wouldn't have as big a budget.
Okay. So you don't think that would affect how he moves within the industry? If he wasn't as big proclaimed director, writer?
Well, here's the thing is just for so much of his career, he was still like the type of films that he was making, it was hard for him to get financing for shit. The only people that would work with him were Miramax, who was led by, creepy motherfucker.
Which was a big ass financer.
Yeah, well, they weren't a big ass financer. I mean, but they were the ones that for those type of movies were the only ones that would do anything like that.
Which is all he needed. He didn't need anybody else. You think if he didn't have that, or if he needed that, his mindset would change?
I don't think so. I think this is all, of course, hypothetical, but I think that his attitude towards film, I think that's he was going to be that way regardless. He probably would have just made smaller movies. He wanted to make I've seen him talk in many different interviews. Mm-hmm. He doesn't really give that much of a fuck about executives. He's always just wanted to do whatever he wanted his way. Even when he writes and directs, like a lot of directors, they'll work with they'll let the art, the actors have more free reign when it comes to changing up dialogue, etc. Yeah. Tarantino was like, no, it has to be said this way. This is how I said it. He's not as collaborative in that sense.
Yeah. I like your argument. I mean, not argument, but I like that whole idea.
Yeah, this is it's not fully fleshed out.
I get it. But instead of separating the two mindsets, I feel like what you were saying before, it's like a spectrum. Like people are maybe one more sided than the other, but there's still a sense of entertainment for everybody, or a sense of artist for everybody. I don't think it's just you're entertainer or artist. I think there's entertainers that are probably mostly entertainers, but they still have that artist mindset. And there's artists like Quentin Tarantino that are artists, but I think they still have some mindset of being an entertainer and wanting to entertain people. But I do think that the industry might be leaning more towards entertainer, which is
also entertainers are safer.
And it's obvious, and it's a obvious choice. Why would you, like you said, safer? Why wouldn't you?
Because here's the thing: is Kanye I would describe as more of an artist.
See, I would describe him as more an entertainer.
Well, he's so bipolar. I think he just goes back and forth. See, my point is typically he's a hard case because he cares so much about certain people's opinion of him, but at the same time doesn't give a fuck about a lot of people's opinion of what he does, if that makes sense. It's kind of this weird dichotomy. I can't say that word. Dichotomy in that sense.
Yeah.
Where he cares so much about the product itself.
I think he cares a lot about entertaining people. I think he really does. But I also think
point of the reason I would describe him more as a artist is because he's willing to just self-destruct for his product to get more eyes on it in a lot of ways.
I think, yeah, exactly.
But also I think it's hard with him because of mental health shit. So
yeah, it is a hard.
So it's hard to point out okay, in certain times he's this, but other times he's that, and you can maybe point to
Yeah.
He most likely has some level of being bipolar.
Yeah. Let's do Drake for an
Drake, I
example.
would categorize more as an entertainer.
I would too, but I think he has a large he thinks about art a lot. I think. I don't think that's why he gets so big. He's so big because, like you said, like James Cameron, like they're able to have both at a high level. And I
would
think
still,
I think as an artist, that's what makes you successful. Try to have both at a high level,
yeah.
and you will be a successful artist.
Well, that would be
Mostly.
more of like trying to play closer to the middle. Because we're talking about a spectrum.
Yeah, it's really
I would
hard
still
to
have Drake a little bit more left because I think he's
I agree.
just like figured out like, okay, these sounds are what works. If I jump on these sounds, this is what like I'll be able to stay on top of
yeah.
the
But
incoming waves of
yes
what's
and no.
cool.
Yes and no.
Because Jay-Z did the same shit of like, who are the next upcoming things? Okay, I'm gonna just jump on those real quick.
I don't necessarily 100% agree. I agree a little bit, but I think I think they both jump on things that they like.
Well, yeah,
first.
they're not gonna do it if they don't like it.
They like the art and they want to do the art before they decide. Let me just do this just to do this. So that's why I like. But I can see what you're saying. He's more on the entertaining side.
Because I would say because he's calculated with
Yeah.
what he does.
Yeah.
That's where I think an artist is more of an impulse.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I guess it's more of like within the spectrum itself. I think a big part of it has to do with how calculated you are making decisions. Because like
I don't know, man.
someone who's like a full entertainer,
Yeah.
they're calculated with these things. Like they may not even be. I think calculated maybe not be the right word because
Yeah.
some people it's just like, oh, I see this work, so I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
So I don't know if calculated because that feels like that's a higher degree.
I think it's just intent. Like, why are you making this?
Yeah, in a way.
Yeah. So it's like entertainers, their intent to make it is more just to get eyeballs or to entertain people rather than like they really care about the art.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I get it. It's a good idea. I think it's true. I think there are mostly just two types of mindsets, but it's like spectrum. So people have more than other, people have less than other, but it's always two are always there, you know, both of them.
Yeah, and I think, of course, most people in the entertainment industry are entertainers, which is kind of why
Yeah.
it's called the entertainment industry.
Yeah.
It's just there happens to be artists there who are just usually pissed off because artists usually aren't. They're the ones that would get respect from other people within the industry, but it's hard for them to connect with people outside of it.
Now we have a deeper conversation. Which one do you think is best for the industry? Let's say
I think
like
there
the
has
film
to be,
industry.
of course, the safe answer. There needs to be some level of balance.
Yeah.
Because I think if you just get only entertainers, at some point, I think audiences just get bored.
And the art just becomes stagnant.
Well, that's what I mean.
Get bored, yeah.
You gotta get bored because things just get stagnant because it's just like, okay, we're just making similar shit
But I don't know.
to other things.
I don't know. Because eventually, you know, the goal is to have more eyes and get entertaining. So if it becomes stagnant, entertainers are probably going to start being more creative.
Well, here's the other thing.
Like let's say like, for example, like remakes. You know, what if remakes just stop making this much money? They're gonna have to pivot.
And I think the pivot typically happens with someone who's more of an artist.
I think
Because let's think about, let's go with the current thing right now, superhero films.
Yeah.
What film do you think really spurred on superhero films becoming what they are now?
I don't think it was a specific film. I think it was I think superhero films always has been a thing. People always enjoyed it, but I think Marvel made it mainstream by just Kevin Feige just being smart as fuck and how to like market that whole IP.
Okay, so here's what my thought process is.
Yeah.
I think the film that did it, or the films that did it, were Sam Raimi's Spider-Man films.
Okay.
Of course, there are superhero films before that, like there's Superman in the 70s or 80s.
X-Men were big.
Well, they were kind of more mid 2000s, I feel like.
X-Men?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas Sam Raimi's first one came out, I think 2000, 2001.
Well, yeah, we'll check that. But yeah, actually, yeah.
Yeah, and so those films were fucking massive.
Yeah.
There were superhero films before that would do pretty good money. But with those, they did fucking big as shit. Like, comparably compared to previous superhero films. And I think that proved more to the industry of like, okay, these films work. So then whenever is being reactive as the industry is, Warner Brothers go, okay, we've made Superman before. We made some Batman ones in the 90s. One was decent, one was shit. And it's like, okay, let's try to find a director who can try to do the same thing for us that Sam Raimi did with Spider-Man. And then we got Christopher Nolan, who then made Batman Begins, and then, of course, The Dark Knight, that came out, what year? 2007, 2008?
Yes, something like that.
And around that same time, Marvel, who didn't do Spider-Man because that was Sony, because they had the rights to it, I think Marvel felt more comfortable, like they were able to get more financing, because at this time they weren't owned by Disney.
Yeah.
It was Kevin Feige, and then I think Alan Horn, I think, was the other dude in charge.
Yeah.
I think they were mostly working with Paramount for distribution, but they were handling a lot of financing themselves. It got easier for them to pitch their idea because Spider-Man trilogy did a bunch of money. These two Batman movies just did did really good money. They didn't do crazy money, but at least they made an impact.
Yeah.
All these films we're talking about made an impact, and it made it easy for Marvel to then go, okay, we have to hit it out of the park with Iron Man. And they did enough where then they could keep making more and more. And then Avengers hit. And around that time is when Disney bought them.
Yeah.
And it's been that way ever since, just pumping them out, because it's gotten proved by people who are willing to push their idea. Because Sam Raimi he's that guy when it comes to, I describe him as more of an artist. And I think he wanted to make a Spider-Man movie. Yeah. And he got to make one. And he did a great job with it, to the point where, okay, superhero films do work. It proves to the business that superhero films do work. So then, as more artists prove that, like Christopher Nolan, I would describe as an artist too, but I think he also does a good job of like getting a little bit closer to entertainer. But I think he stays mostly on artist side, and he's been able to build up such a massive fan base on the fact that he's an artist.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So basically, that's my point. Is I think the turns that happen are because of one artist proves that this type of thing works. And then you'll have artists go into that same thing and entertainers. And then I think eventually at some point it will switch to something else because things start getting stagnated.
Yeah. But
I think the pivot usually happens because an artist wanted to do something and they got their way somehow, or got enough of their way to make a change happen.
But at the same time, that pivot, the entertainers, I feel like allow artists or just whatever to build on that and make it better than what was before.
I don't know what you just said.
So like I agree. There's a lot of like things that helped. Not even like the Spider-Man, or it was like the X-Men probably helped, because that was a big franchise. The Batman helped. The Spider-Man helped. I feel like superheroes has always been a thing, but when Marvel,
they've been more one-off kind of things, or like a quick trilogy, and then you don't see another superhero film for a while.
Yeah. So, but when Marvel, when an IP, a big IP that's focused on entertaining comes, it's like we're gonna try to entertain people. I feel like that is what made people be entertained by these real big superhero movies that are really good, in my opinion. And it's it's confusing because you can call them artists as well, because they're able. It's so smart. Like the calculations, the calculated like mindset is they're able to make really good art as well, which is confusing to say because they're not really artists.
I guess my point. I guess when I'm using the label of entertainer or artist, the reason I say artist is because their focus in itself is the art itself. It's not necessarily like what is going to be the reactions or whatever. It's like, I want this art to be the way I want. It's more of a selfish thing, I feel like. I guess maybe is the way to put it.
And I get it. And
it's more being a selfish creative versus like creating for as many people as you can.
I get it. And I'm like arguing that maybe entertaining could be better for. I'm not saying I'm 100% agreeing with this, but maybe it could be because, like you said, selfish art sometimes it just don't hit.
But when it does,
a lot of times it just don't hit. But also entertaining hits, and when it does, it hits big as well, and it's really good. So it's like you said, but At the end of the day, it's a balance and need both for sure.
Yeah, that's my point. Is like you need both, and sometimes I think it gets too far one. Like,
Yeah,
I don't think it's really ever gone too far the artist way because it's not.
because you can't.
You're not going to make as much.
Exactly, you can't.
The business doesn't always.
It's not going to grow.
Yeah.
It's not really going to grow like that. It's going to grow maybe artistically, maybe, but like, I know. But at the same time, you need that entertaining to make the money for it to help grow, and I feel like that's an important and really important part.
Yeah, so like I think that when the business got the most to artists, like lean more towards artists, is 70s and 90s. In the 80s, it went really far back to the entertaining.
Yeah,
And then since 2000s, we've gone heavily into entertain with artists. Like, of course, you're still gonna have your artist films come here and there, because during the 80s, when people talk about it, it was the most corporate it had been. Like after the 70s, especially, you still had James Cameron making his shit.
yeah,
But the 70s, because there was a transition from old Hollywood to new Hollywood, a bunch of the old executives were old. So then new executives came in, and those executives were honest of like, we don't really know what the fuck works. So these kids that were coming straight out of film school, they got to make different shit that wouldn't have gotten made before. And guess who all those people ended up being? Scorsese, Spielberg, George Lucas, Francis Ford Coppola. Basically, all these fucking legends we look at nowadays, they all came from that because the business was willing to let them make shit that wouldn't have gotten made before because they didn't know what was going to work.
See, man, this is such a.
But here's the thing: it could have gone really badly if they picked the wrong people.
I guess this is where my mind goes.
In the 90s, of course, you had like the big indie boom. So you had a lot of more people that could be described more as artists make it through because there was a big indie boom.
Yeah.
And I think indie typically tends to be more artistic.
Yeah. Yeah. See, this is where my mind goes. Because I look back at a lot of the movies that came out during that time. Like we said, like the those directors you just named. I forgot what you just said. But I look back at those movies and I watch. I'm like, yeah, they're good, but they're not like just these amazing films that everybody just needs to watch. And
well, that's
just
subjective on your part, though.
Exactly, and I think that it's like they were legends. They are legends.
I think
of course.
It's because you're used to a certain type of pacing we have nowadays.
It's not even that. It's just. I think that. I think that whenever there is a dry with art, like there's no art coming out, there are going to be people that make big movies and be legends because people just want to watch movies, you know?
Now, here's the thing. No, a lot of those movies fucking slap. I think it's just because you don't like as slow a pace as it was then.
I'm not going to say that. I like older movies. Those older movies that I do enjoy that I've seen. But there are also some that people think are just legendary that I just don't like.
I'm saying I think a lot of the reasons you don't like it's because it has to do with like this.
But we can't say that
thing of like the pacing feels probably different than what you're used to.
But you can't say that when there are movies that I like that have the pacing or that are made in the same years or same times. I just think that the movies are just not that good to me. Rather be the writing.
So I'm just thinking of like Scorsese films from back then, fucking slapped. Francis Ford Coppola movies back then.
I think
Francis Ford Coppola had a fucking run in the 70s.
So this is going to be a controversial take.
Get on that ledge by yourself.
I think that we need to start looking back. A lot of these directors and movies that we think are just legendary legends, amazing movies, and like kind of like rethink how we feel about these movies, because are they that legendary?
Yeah, you can get on this ledge by yourself.
Like, are they like? I'm looking at Christopher Nolan, right? I love, man, what's that movie where they go in space? Interstellar. I love Interstellar. I think that's a great ass movie. I look back. I rewatched Inception. I mean, it's cool.
I think that is just your take.
I guess, because
I still have Inception. Still my favorite.
When's the last time you seen it?
We've already had this discussion.
I know, but
it was like a year or two ago.
I liked Inception when it came out. I thought it was a cool movie. I rewatched it and I look back and I'm just like it's like music. You know how music comes out and it's like, oh, this song was like huge and people loved it. and it probably didn't age that well. That's how I feel. That's how I feel about a lot of movies, a lot of directors, but nobody says that in the film industry. Nobody, that conversation does not happen. And I'm like, maybe
No, they'll talk about how films don't age that well. But here's the thing: is like, especially like a lot of comedies, people will talk about like Ace Ventura did not age well.
I just don't hear that a lot with.
But no, here's the. I think here is the point you're kind of missing is one. If everyone else except for you thinks that these are good, then I think it's just you don't like it.
I don't see. I don't.
But here's the other thing: is like you're also not taking an effect of what did that film, going back to our whole thing about like art and what it means for a time or what it means for culture.
Yeah.
These films also signify that. It's like you look back and go to whatever time Goodfellas came out. You think like people who have seen that film back then get that emotion of connection to it. And then people who might be coming afterwards might go back and look at, watch that movie and you get a feel for what it was like then. And then people will get like really nostalgic for a time that they didn't live in.
Yeah.
So I think you're forgetting that fact of like the films that people talk about like that. There is a reason why it's kind of underlying that you may not just be, you just may not feel a connection towards.
You know what I think, why I feel that way. I think is because it's kind of what you're saying. I think it's because the film industry has been, only available to a certain
for sure.
demographic, to where now it's kind of opening up to where.
Well, for sure, Hollywood is elitist as fuck.
So like if you think about like, for example, I feel like a lot of people that are in my culture rewatch some of these movies that like the industry thinks are just legendary, amazing. We're gonna look back and be like, it's all right.
Yeah.
But the movies that we like are in our culture, we're gonna like, oh, it's legendary. I think that's just kind of how it is. And I feel like when people come into this industry, there's already a set list of directors that are just legendary, that we just have to say are legendary, amazing, like Christopher Nolan or whatever.
Yeah, well, that's the current day person.
Yeah.
You'd just be like, this person's great.
Yeah, just
I'm sure my fucking clip of saying Christopher Nolan ruined the film industry is gonna go. I'm gonna get cooked for that at some point.
But I'm just saying, like, and for me, this experience only happens in the film industry. I don't see this happening in any other industry. Really,
it happens in music, certain genres.
Certain genres, and I'm just like, okay, maybe it's time to like rethink this list that we have, because, like, for example, even Quentin Tarantino. I like Quentin Tarantino's movies. I think Kill Bill is great. One of my top 5 favorite movies.
One is still better than two, but continue.
One of my top 5. I put them two together, but one of my top 5 favorite movies. I like what's the movie where there's the Jewish and the
Glorious Bastards. I fucking love that movie.
See, I like Glorious Bastards, but when I saw them and when it wasn't just like this overwhelming of greatness.
I fucking love that movie.
That when I came in this industry, Quentin Tarantino was already on that pedestal of, this amazing greatness, and I'm like, okay, I guess I got to put him there because people say so, and I feel like a lot of people do that.
I think there is some level of like you pay respect to the people that came before you because they've built the path. It's kind of like NBA players coming in now, like whenever they hear people say like, "Oh, this player is better," or like "This player was great back in their day," and then being like, "Well, I'm better than that fucking person, so fuck them." But here's the thing: is like because that person existed, you're able to make $30 million on your contract while they could only make $1 million.
Sure.
So it's like you still pay respect because your game may or may not have some built from the foundation that they may have contributed to at their time.
Sure.
Because you got to think is within film, when you're being a director or writing, there is a language to film. There's a pacing. There are different pacings to film. And all of those were set by people that came before. So whenever you're making something, you have to consider that people have been conditioned by what's come before when you're making something, whether it be purposely breaking it or following behind, like doing the same pacing, that type of shit. So there's a level of like, you pay respect to the people that came before you because they paved the road in a time that was different.
Sure.
And of course I can get the fact of like, it's probably harder to connect to certain types of films because it's like, even now it's hard to get into the film industry because we're not in the film industry yet, technically.
Yeah.
Where if you don't have certain backgrounds, because here to nowadays, if you want to go through the traditional route of working up on the business side, you have to go and basically be an unpaid intern or be only paid like $12 an hour working in someone's office. But here's the thing. You can't live in LA on that amount of money.
Yeah.
Whatever the minimum wage is, like 15. You can't live on that. So the only people that get to take those jobs are people who have a wealthy enough family that subsidizes their dream.
Yeah.
And that typically means they have enough money where they don't give a fuck that they're probably wasting money on this person's dream. So the people that get into the doors are the people that have a similar experience because they all have a similar experience of coming from wealth.
Yeah.
And we know typically people that come from wealth have other things that are very common in their background.
Yeah. I'm not gonna lie. I don't know what point you're making.
I'm basically saying is like, even nowadays, we still have the same issue when it comes to a lot of people that go in through the traditional route in the film industry have a similar background of coming from a wealthy family.
Yeah.
Whereas before is also pretty similar too.
Yeah.
But it was kind of, I started going one way and then my brain took me another. That's called ADHD. My whole point was like, I get why you may not feel like a level of connection to some older films, especially. Because also like, and I went back and watched The Searchers. People go and say that's one of the greatest films of all time. I enjoyed it, but I don't look at it the same way. But then I can also like, if I'm going to try to break it down from like a very logical thought process of like, if I was making a film, I think it's a very like helpful to go back and watch those and try to like reverse engineer what they did based on what things they had limited to them at their time.
I don't
and
know.
also like you got to think what came before them.
Yeah.
When they made that film.
Sure.
So that plays a lot of it. And of course, when you go back and watch older films, it's like, God damn, this is racist as fuck.
Sure.
Shit. Like I was going down this whole like video series that was going down the history of film, like the film industry.
Yeah.
So like the film that broke like the original way of things being done was of course probably the most racist film of all time, Birth of a Nation.
Yeah.
Like the moving of the camera, how the blocking everything, that was like the first film that really took it to another level.
And why do you say it's important to know that, to watch that?
Well, my point is like, you see how things progressed before you. That way you can kind of get an idea of like, okay, how could we progress what we have now to another thing?
I guess.
It's like, I guess the way of thinking about it is like, whenever you're going through school and learning like English, you start learning the structures of it, and you kind of get to see like, you basically learn all the different structures of it, and you get to hear how it's kind of supposed to be said. But then you also have the experience of like what's current, of like how things will be said.
And why is that important?
I think it's like it's hard to explain what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I hear people like for when you go to film school, you look at all these old movies and learn, and I always wonder, why is that important to do that? I always wonder that.
I guess here's an example. Whenever we as like a native English speaker break the rules of English, it sounds natural because we have had our entire lives of being around the language. Yeah. We learned all the basics of how the grammatical structure of English works. Like, think about like adjectives to a noun. There is actually you don't even realize it, but there is actually a grammatical rule that they don't teach in school, but tells you how the order of adjectives go. See, so it's like the big red dog. You just intuitively know that, right? But if you heard somebody whose like second language is English, they might say red big dog. It doesn't sound as natural because doesn't sound as natural because we've been conditioned to see it a certain way or hear it a certain way. But to them, they don't realize that rule exists. And we can tell based on hearing them that they don't have the entire understanding of the language itself. So I guess that's my point is like, if we decided to just break a rule and it might become slang going forward because we broke an English rule and people liked how we did it. Whereas someone whose second language is English, they might do the same thing, but it might not sound as natural and it wouldn't become a new thing. Yeah. So I get understanding. I get understanding how things work and why things work. Yeah. And I think that's what the point you're trying to say. You watch old movies to understand why things worked. Yeah, and then you're able to see how they might have broke how things were done at that time, and then that might give you an inspiration on how you could break the current way things are being done. Sure. And I get that, but I still have
the thought of, okay, I can look back at this movie,
Yeah.
I guess, and see how it worked, which is cool, and it is a good thing to do. But at the same time, it's like it's not really that important to me, you know. Like when people say The Searchers is the greatest movie ever made, okay, but it doesn't have to be the greatest movie ever made. And I feel like when people go into this industry, we just put these things on this pedestal because people have been saying it.
Yeah.
And I guess that's what I'm trying to say. Like Christopher, like whenever you hear people like, what are your five favorite directors?
Yeah, it's always the same people.
Always the same people.
Well, here's also the thing is that business doesn't market directors like they used to.
Sure. But
there was an era where they would actually market directors a lot, and
Yeah.
those are the directors that we all think of now.
sure. But
In this era, they market IP, and then they still market actors because that's how it's always going to be. But they market IP for the most part now,
yeah.
and they'll market a movie as a product, but they don't market like the creators behind it.
Sure. And I'm not mad at people having people are liking Christopher Nolan movies or Steven Spielberg movies or whatever. I'm not mad at that. But I just want to know the intent of why you like or why you pick these people. Is it because you heard when you came into the industry about these movies and then you watched it and then you just got kind of brainwashed to liking them and just thinking like they're the best? I feel like a lot of people do that with Quentin Tarantino. I'm not gonna lie. I feel like a lot of people just get kind of like brainwashed and like, oh, it's creative, it's cool.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people do that. And that's my point. That's my point of what I'm trying to say. And I don't know.
Oh yeah, we've talked about that. Like when people like start trying to write their own shit, they always fucking try to sound like Tarantino.
Yeah. And it's just like this is what I be thinking about, and I always trying to break down like why people like things or why things matter to people, and I always get confused. But yeah, you made some good points of like understanding why.
Yeah, it's just like my thought process is like I get that some people don't want to go back and do like the research of it because that's just the different. There's people have different ways of creating what things inspire them.
Yeah,
some people may not even really watch that many movies as a director because what realistically inspires them is listening to maybe soundtracks or just listening to music, and it gives them ideas. But I think a lot of times what it comes down to is like you can take what's been done before you, and you can take pieces from that for your current thing. And if you go back and do like a lot of old film history, you might be able to pull stuff that people aren't currently pulling from anymore because they're pulling from someone who pulled from something before.
Yeah.
And it might seem like it's something new and fresh because you pulled something from a movie from the 40s, but with the eyes of today. Mm-hmm. Whereas it's going to seem different if all the other directors around you are pulling from a movie from the 70s that pulled from that movie.
Yeah.
It's going to be slightly different, which then people see yours as like, oh, it's like this original thing. And it's like, well, no, I kind of did the same thing these people did. It's just I pulled from the original source with my own eyes versus these guys and girls are pulling from this person here who pulled from that thing.
Yeah. And I get that. But it's kind of the same, like I studied computer science, right? And, we learned about how computers were made, like the first computers. None of that affects me at all right now, at all. Like I'm in the industry, and I don't need to know what the first computer was. I don't need to know what the first programming language was. I didn't need to know that. For now, it's going to get to a point where I don't even need to know necessarily how to. I need to know how to program, but I don't need to know the real gritty specifics of it because I get all these tools that help me. And I think that's kind of what I'm trying to say. You don't need to. I guess you should. I don't know. It's just.
Well, here's the thing I think of when you say that is like, I think for like your day to day, you don't need to know any of that shit.
Yeah.
But if you decided like, okay, I want to build like my whole entire operating system from scratch, from the ground up, I think it helps to know what was done before and how they did it.
Yeah, I don't think so.
But you may not have a need to. But I'm just saying, like, I think it's helpful to know how other people might have done something that you're trying to do.
Yeah.
If you're trying, as I said, if you're trying to literally build your own Windows off of nothing else, and just seeing how they developed it might give you some level of like, okay, here is my kind of framework for how I should go forward doing this.
Yeah, sure.
Whether it be doing the same thing, but with your own language you want to do, or if you want to do something completely different, it helps to still have some level of a scaffolding of what was done before.
Sure. Yeah, sure.
So I think that's where it comes beneficial. But if you're just going to be working day to day, you may not even need to know it.
Sure. Yes and no. Like, well, I guess say you want to build your own operating system. You want to build Windows. It's not really a good example because
I know I don't have good examples because it's not my area.
let's say you want to build a website or you want to build an application.
Yeah.
You don't need to know what the first application was and how the industry was changed by that build. You just need to know what tools you need to know to build it. And there's a lot of resources to tell you what's the most efficient, what type of application you want, what the tools you need to do that, blah blah blah. And I guess them figuring out what is good comes from like the history of it.
Yeah.
But you don't need
You're
to
relying
know.
on somebody else who's figured all that stuff out based
Yeah.
on what was done before.
Exactly. And that's how I feel about like recent movies. I don't need to go all the way back to the first movie we ever made because I see it with the recent movies.
Yeah. Well, I feel like that's kind of more still an apples and oranges type of argument in that because with computer science, in a lot of ways, it's kind of an engineering thing of like, there is a most efficient way of doing things. Whereas with a movie, there's a degree to artist interpretation and interpretation of an audience. So I don't know if it's not I don't think it's a comparable, but I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's a comparable argument.
Like for example, let's say Steven Spielberg made a movie that he pulled from, like got inspired from movies back in the 30s.
Yeah, that's all his films.
Yeah, and so I see a movie by Steven Spielberg and I'm inspired by it. I can be inspired by a part that he was inspired by in the 30s. I don't need to go back to the 30s to see that. I can see what Steven Spielberg did and be inspired by that.
Well, my point is like, you're being inspired by the way Spielberg did it.
Yeah.
But I'm saying is like, there's maybe another way to pull a new, fresh idea is to go back to the original source that he pulled from to pull it your way. Because you might take a completely different thing from your life experiences and the way things are today. You may pull that thing and pull something completely different than what he pulled in the 70s.
Sure. Or I could not. Or I could see where Steven Spielberg comes from and like, I like Steven Spielberg's better. And a lot of times that's how I feel.
Well, I'm just saying it's a way also to distinguish yourself from other people because they're probably doing the same thing, pulling from that same thing from Spielberg.
And Spielberg probably did the same thing other directors did.
Well, they all took from John Ford. That's where all that came from.
But yeah, my experience was I go back to these movies that I see and I'm like, yeah, I like how the recent artists did it better. I enjoyed that better and I'm inspired more by that than because I wasn't alive in the 30s. Like I don't.
I mean, of course, that's just how you're like. We're going in circles again.
I know.
It's like I get what you're saying, and then I'm saying is like I think it's beneficial to still go back and do the research because you may be able to pull something that no one's ever pulled before.
Yeah,
but
it's just two different.
Yeah, we're having two different mindsets. One may be better, one may not be better. It may be this. It's just if it ends up the product being the way you want it to be,
that's all that matters. Yeah, I get it.
That has another discussion point, but I think we are at a point in this episode. But we'll discuss it the next one.
Okay, sure.
Yeah. Well, this time we didn't yell at each other, so I think that's a good episode.
Yeah, we had a meaningful discussion, I guess.
Yeah,
that's pretty good.
Yeah, we didn't even hit a single one of those things I was planning to talk about.
I feel like that's usually how it goes. We miss like majority of what we want to talk about. We just talk about random stuff.
Yeah, it's a good thing we don't have a whiteboard because we wouldn't be talking about that shit.
We wouldn't hit any marks.
Because I feel like I can't purposely hit something.
Yeah, because it feels
because
like,
I just don't have the skill.
It feels forced. Yeah,
I don't have the skill to like naturally go from a topic to another topic that I want to discuss. Usually,
we're not good. We're not that good yet.
Yeah, we suck at this.
Yeah, we'll get there.
Yeah, we're all impulse. All impulse, no plan. That's the name of this podcast. Actually, it's about the lineup. Peace out.